В эти дни по всему миру проходят акции солидарности.
Voices of Freedom. The past few days have witnessed a rise of a global solidarity movement in support of Alexey Navalny and against the lawlessness and political repression in Russia. A new wave of political repressions has consumed the Russian civil society in the past few months. The response of the Russian-speaking diaspora, Russians living outside Russia, this time has been unprecedented. Acts of solidarity have taken place in over 60 cities in different countries of the world on different continents. They stretched from Reykjavik, Iceland, to Wellington, New Zealand, and from Seoul, South Korea, to Lisbon, Portugal. Demonstrations and protests were organized in many cities throughout Germany and in the United States, in many European capitals. The Czech Republic, where I have been living and working for the past few years, is among these centers of support. And I have been an active participant in these public acts of solidarity since January 23, 2021. Why is the reaction of the diaspora so strong this time? Alexey Navalny was poisoned, transported to Germany in a coma, underwent treatment, returned to Russia, where he was immediately arrested and put in prison. Of course, even before all of these events took place, we knew that Putin's regime is steadily morphing into a more and more brutal and cynical dictatorship. But the events surrounding Navalny's assassination attempt became some sort of a culmination. Even those who had purposefully decided not to get engaged into politics, including Russian politics, all of a sudden saw the reality come into a crystal clear picture. What we see in this case is the simultaneous use of banned offensive chemical weapons in crude violation of the International Convention on Chemical Weapons, which Russia had ratified. We see a full degradation of the Russian justice system. Of course, we knew about this trend, but here it is, fully and publicly manifested against a person who heroically decided to return to his motherland. We see, for the first time, a clearly established substantiation, evidence established by a journalistic investigation that the very assassination attempt on Navalny was organized by government officials, FSB employees. And they used all the resources of their organization. They used fake passports and IDs when needed. They relied on the support of local administrations and government branches of the secret services. What can be done against these crimes by people who only have acts of citizen solidarity at their disposal? Not much. There were large marches. A large march in Berlin, over 5,000 people. There was a large gathering in Prague. Smaller gatherings in other cities where Russian diasporas are smaller. Nevertheless, they did come out to the streets. These are the people who are now wondering, what else can they do to help? Indeed, inside Russia, Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation has recently announced that it will no longer ask people to come out to the streets in support of Alexey Navalny, because these acts are brutally dispersed by the government forces. They result in mass arrests. Government violates the rights of journalists covering these protests by arresting them as well. Criminal persecution and fabrication of politically motivated criminal cases against participants of protests are churned out on a large scale. This is what Navalny's team, his Anti-Corruption Foundation, decided to no longer call for protests, but has put forth a new strategy. But those Russians who are not inside Russia, their situation is different. They are not participating in the political struggle inside Russia. For them, the change in tactics of the Anti-Corruption Foundation is not so important because they want to continue to express their solidarity and support for all of the Kremlin's political prisoners. Navalny's plight has really struck a nerve. It agitated the wounds related to the memories of all the past injustices, including the fabricated criminal charges against the elderly historian Yuri Dmitriev, who is now in prison. This case against him was fabricated by the Karelian division of the FSB in order to stop his work to document Stalin's mass executions in Karelia and memorialize the victims of these crimes. Immediately coming to mind, the Crimean Tatars, who, after the Russian illegal annexation of the Crimea, bore the brunt of an intense aggression from the FSB, and many of them are now behind bars. Ukrainian political prisoners who are now serving prison terms on the Russian territory. We can't forget the Ingush political prisoners, innocent people who came out to the streets in peaceful gatherings, who were brutally dispersed and received draconian prison terms. Anyone who today takes a moment to examine what's going on inside Russia understands this situation will not magically improve tomorrow. There are simply no forces on the Russian political arena that are able and ready to end these repressions. Moreover, there are no political forces that openly call for the rule of law, for democracy, and for human rights. These are basic concepts. If one is looking at them, as I am now, from outside of Russia, where these rights and norms are protected. However, inside Russia, joining the struggle to defend these rights comes with deadly risks. The square in Prague, which hosts these solidarity marches, is named after Boris Nemtsov, who was murdered in 2015 precisely for his political statements, for criticizing Putin's system of government, and for calling for reinstatement of the rule of law in Russia and protecting human rights and those international legal norms and conventions that it had signed. This is the shared understanding of all participants of the global solidarity movement. Unlike Russians inside Russia, they are able to come out to the streets to ensure that the Western and international media outlets do not abandon the plight of the Kremlin's political prisoners and keep it in the public spotlight. Diaspora members can make a meaningful contribution by initiating public calls, writing letters and petitions to specific European and international legislators and officials, political leaders, celebrities, international organizations, in order to grow the global solidarity movement to a much larger scale, and in order to remind the politicians of other countries that the problem still exists, and this problem is relevant to their own countries, not just limited to inside Russia. The protests inside Russia and global acts of solidarity in their support have been built upon the political dynamics initiated by the Belarusian civil society. Starting with August 2020, every Sunday, the Belarusian diaspora across the globe comes out to the streets to express solidarity with Belarusians inside Belarus, who also come out to the streets every Sunday to protest Lukashenko's regime, his oppression against protesters, his arrests, his falsification of the results of the presidential election last summer, his violation of the international conventions on the protected status of journalists by jailing them. The forceful suppression of opposition by police in Belarus and Russia today are fully synchronized and mirror each other precisely. This is why, during diaspora-organized marches in Bordeaux, in Los Angeles, here in Prague, Belarusians and Russians march together. All participants of these acts of solidarity continue to ask themselves, what can be done, let's say by a national government of their home country, country of residence, in order to influence the situation in Russia? What can the European Union do? What can the US do? What can be done by large international organizations? Different proposals are floated, some calling for intensification of sanctions, others for increasing support to the independent media or civil society groups helping political prisoners. A third group believes that the purveyors of the Kremlin's propaganda must be harshly punished by depriving them of the ability to travel to Europe, and so on and so forth. It is my belief that today, all of these efforts are very important. All ideas that are publicly expressed, all ideas that are brought forth for a public discussion at international platforms, in Brussels, in Berlin, and in Paris, here in Prague, where I am now. Because only together, having joined forces, we can move up to a new level of discussion with Putin's regime. The type of discussion that will force him to retreat from these horrific and hopeless practices that violate human rights, liberties, and the international conventions that Russia had signed over the years, and now the Kremlin is violating in a most cynical manner.
человека, нарушение свобод и нарушение тех конвенций, которые Россия подписала в разные годы, а Кремль теперь цинично их игнорирует.